Howdy everyone, it's me Zombie, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make something that I get a lot of questions about. Shin armor! I know, shins and calves are a weird shape and it can be hard to craft just the right piece to keep your legs looking pretty while you're cosplaying. I'm making a Star-Lord costume from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I thought today would be a perfect opportunity to show you how I made these cool shin covers slash armored pieces. Looking at my reference pictures, it looks like some parts of these shins are supposed to be made out of leather. I could have made these out of leather, but after my Aloy cosplay, I kind of wanted to take a break from working with copious amounts of leather, at least for a little while. Plus, using foam as a leather alternative is a budget-friendly and easy alternative. To start creating my shins, I started by sketching my references onto some cheap craft paper. This allows me to visualize how I want to draw the pattern. After sketching out my shin design, I decided that I wanted these shins to be two separate pieces. This would make them more accurate to my reference pictures and more functional to wear. I measured the length and width of my shins with a ruler and added an extra inch for some wiggle room. I used my measurements and transferred them onto craft paper. After I had my basic shape I wanted for my shins all sketched out, I started doodling in some more details to match my reference picture. Keep in mind that I always fold my patterns in half like this when I'm making symmetrical pieces. Drawing a half pattern means that I can leave the guesswork of making a symmetrical pattern out of this. I use my scissors to cut out my details and then unfold my patterns to make sure that they look right. Now to get some work done, it's time to transfer these two patterns onto 4mm EVA foam. Since I made a two-part pattern for my shins, I'm tracing each pattern twice because I have two shins! To make tracing these larger patterns easier, I like using regular sewing pins and pinning my patterns to the foam before tracing them with a silver Sharpie. The teeny tiny pinholes that result from doing this are unnoticeable, and I've found that they get filled in when I seal and prime the pieces anyway. This is the first time that I'm using foam from TNT Cosplay Supply. I have to say that I really like this stuff. The foam comes in large sheets, and a bunch of different thicknesses are available. With how much I pay for EVA foam in 11 by 12 inch pieces, TNT's foam really is cost effective, and it's great for those large foam pieces that I need to create. Like these shin pieces, for example. Now it's utility knife time! I use a super sharp utility knife to cut out all of my foam bits. And ta-da! Now my pieces are cut out. Let's make them prettier! I'm using my rotary tool to round out my edges. I've found that rounding out edges of my foam makes the finished piece look a little bit more neat and organic. I stuck the two parts of my leg covers together on one side and left the other side open. The open side of the shin piece is where I'll be installing buckles so I can easily take these on and off. I've added two side panels with 2mm foam as a decorative piece on the front of the shin. I'm using a sharp X-Acto blade to cut these lines diagonally into the 2mm foam pieces. After these are cut, I can use my heat gun to warm up the foam. Warming up the foam will make these cuts separate and really pop. I added 3 half-inch buckles to each leg by contact cementing each of the buckles onto the straps I designed in my foam pattern. Now these are officially functional, woohoo! And my joy was crushed immediately when I realized that I totally forgot to add all of the details on the back. So back to patterning we go! I drew the foam detail patterns that I needed to cut with some craft paper and then transferred them onto my 2mm foam. Since the foam is so thin, I used a pair of scissors to cut them all out. I laid all my foam pieces onto the back of my legs to make sure that they fit just right. After making some minor adjustments, I used super glue to stick all of the detailed bits together to make one larger piece. Since I made all of my little pieces into one big foam sheet, I can use contact cement now to stick it to the back of my shin. When using contact cement, I like using a scrap foam piece to squeegee down all the adhesive so it sticks together evenly. Aha! Success! My shins are assembled and functional. This part isn't necessary, but I'm going back with the rotary tool and smoothing out some of my 2mm foam detail edges. I just think it looks neater that way. To prepare your foam for being painted, it's important to use a heat source to seal your foam. This helps foam become less porous and this allows your foam to look smoother and take paint more effectively. My personal favorite heat sealing tool is a heat gun, but there are lots of options available out there. I want my foam to look like leather. To achieve this, you can see I'm using my heat gun to warm up my foam and then using a balled up piece of tin foil and mushing it on my foam while it's still warm. This will leave an organic looking texture that will read as foam once it's painted. When doing this, do your best not to rewarm the foam once the texture is applied unless you want your texture to disappear. Now it's time to seal these with some Plasti-Dip. Plasti-Dip is a rubber spray that is commonly used as a primer for foam pieces. This prevents your paint from cracking when painting your foam. Now onto one of my favorite parts, painting! The front panel of these shins are maroon. Luckily, I have some maroon acrylic paint right out of the bottle that works perfectly. I decided to add a little bit of black to some of the color on some layers to add more depth. After about 5 layers of maroon, these pieces are starting to look really cool. I added some thin layers of bright red paint with a sponge brush to add some highlights. I'm happy to see that the paint is really catching that textured surface. I painted the back of the shin with some matte black acrylic paint. To start weathering, I layered some dusty tan colors on top of it with a sponge brush. I brushed lightly over this part to let the paint catch where it wanted to. I went back with the side of the sponge brush to add some more dirt in areas where I thought dirt may collect. Once dry, I went in with a detail brush and some acrylic paint and pressed paint into the seams of my foam layers and other small crevices as needed. I mixed some gray acrylic paint and used a chip brush to add some more weathering detail. After that, I went in again with my black acrylic paint and touched up some areas. I find that layering paints and weathering effects really helps your piece look more authentic and lived in. Now that the paint's drying, it's time to try these guys on. I'm so happy with how these look. They fit great and are very comfortable. They're even dance-proof. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this build. I always love seeing what you're working on. It makes my day, so please feel free to share your projects with me on social media. If you like cosplay or just making cool stuff in general, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a video. Thank you guys, and happy making!